Hi, welcome to today's episode of Torcom Talk. Super excited for our guest today, Preston Callicott, CEO of 5 Talent. My mentor. This guy is just a good person through and through. So involved in the community here in Bend, from opportunity knocks, looking forward, now for OSU Cascade, Central Oregon Business Planning, Cascade Business News Advisory Board, OSU's Cascade Collaborative Board, the Bend Chamber, and that's just some of the things that he's on the board of. He's also in the Bend Livability Project, Discover Your Forest, Summit Robotics, Opportunity. I mean, it goes on, and I can literally just list it forever. And you can sense that good in his purpose of looking out for other people and not profit. And I hope you guys are able to take something back from Preston and I's conversation. Preston, you have been a excellent mentor to me, unofficial one, but where is official mentors? Is there official mentor sign up? I don't really think so, but you've helped me a lot over the years build Mazama to what it is, and thank you for that. And you basically I'm fascinated with the way you operate for a couple of reasons. One, you've had a lot of success. So
and failures.
So, but over the years, serial entrepreneur, failing with businesses, succeeding with a bunch. You were telling me times back when just tons of money was coming in, and you were kind of realizing that that's not really what it's about. Which that's the second thing that I'm fascinated about is I truly believe you when you say that. I don't believe everybody when they say that, but when you say that. I see it not just because you're saying it, but because your actions. So the amount of community involvement you're in is too big to list. I listed it before the podcast, but and the amount that you end up helping other people without expecting anything in return. With all the help that, for example, with just in my personal experience, you have helped me tremendously. Monetarily, I don't think I could put a price tag on it, but you've never come back to me and said, I need you to buy this or hire us for that. Not even close.
Right.
Yet we have collaborated
Sure.
on stuff, and I've given you business and vice versa, but it wasn't even because there was like, oh, I owe this guy. It was more because I was like, I know that you do good work.
Right. And the same here. You're the right fit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
anyway, there wasn't a question there, but what I was getting at is I'd like to start with I want to try to help people understand how you think the way you do. So what was the first business that you were involved in or owned? Not involved in, but the first one you owned.
The first one I owned, shortly after college, when I was hired by HP, and I had a pretty good success run at HP, and I had some funds, and I started a bunch of companies at that time, which was mistake number one.
Mistake number one is accepting funds?
No, creating more than one company.
Oh, okay.
I had the Callicott Cattle Company and a recruitment company and a software company.
A cattle company?
Yeah, I don't even go there.
Okay, I didn't know that one.
It was, all just spontaneous entrepreneurship gone wild, and with very little controls. And, of course, there's no way to perform well when you're spinning up three. And and although I had a lot of energy, something had to give. And one succeeded, two failed. Right?
Mm-hmm. So two failed. Which one succeeded?
The recruitment company.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. How did that succeed?
It actually took off, and it was a consultancy basis, right? So it wasn't anything that was going to be an exponential growth rate of any sort. And I sold it to my first wife for $1.
Okay.
So she took that over. So that was a lesson learned is focus early on.
So when you focus on the recruiting one, like what would be like your, as you put, your business superpower in that time?
Well, it was all relationship. Everything that actually succeeded is where relationship was at the top of the game. So even previously, my success at HP, AMD, and Price Waterhouse, to an extent, were all based on building relationships and, you know, the entrepreneurial out of the box, bull in the china closet as well, which is great for startups and not so great for established companies with processes. But yeah, relationship. That was it.
So if I'm an aspiring entrepreneur or somebody that just got in the game and I'm operating my business out of my house and I went as far as making the big business plan and all this sort of stuff. You say relationships, and I think, okay, how? Like, where do I start on building relationships?
Sure. Well, you start by not selling.
Hmm.
You know,
Explain that.
As soon as you
For me
start
too,
the
yeah.
sales process,
Uh-huh.
You've screwed a chance at an authentic relationship. And it's authenticity that lasts. I mean, you can sell something to someone, but you know, to the point where you no longer have a relationship with them, right? It's all about the sale. That's the bulk of sales folks out there. They're out there driven by a quota. Their goal is to get you to buy something, even if it doesn't make sense for that quarter, because you're trying to meet your number, right? That's bound for failure. The clients see through all this stuff, so they realize you're
Your
just in
bullshit
it for the
meter
buck.
goes up, right?
Yeah, you're in it for the buck. Relationships is about authentic relationships. It's not saying bullshit on a relationship. It's being authentic about wanting to be with someone. And you know, the good news is, if it's about friendship, you filter out all the assholes in the beginning, right? Because you're only going to be friends with people that resonate. Right?
Yeah, but Preston, I need money now. I need sales now.
Then get money in a way. Oh well, if you need money, you know, there's 1,000 ways to make money. But if you're asking for success in growing a company or growing your personal brand, and it's one of those two, right? It's either working for someone else or yourself, you know, then reputation is going to last for a long time, right? Those people call back. Most of my business today is thanks to efforts I've done over the last several decades with referrals and stuff like that from those folks saying, hey, he doesn't bullshit you. If he says he can do it, right? That kind of reputation is the most important thing you have. It's the thing that will outlast you. And unless you can scrub the internet clean of your background, you know, people will find out if you have a good or bad reputation.
I think that would be true even before the internet, right?
Oh yeah,
It just takes a few
Sure.
calls.
It
travels.
used to be more relationship back then, you know, where
Yeah.
you used to wine and dine, and there wasn't a lot of chances to digitally connect, so you had to personally connect. And I sort of miss those days, right? You know,
I never got to have those days. My dad got to have those
There you
days all
go.
the time. My mom and dad would go
Thanks
out
for
to
calling me
Morton's.
your dad now. Oh, thanks.
I would always be like, I was like, you know, that'd be cool when I get into business, like getting to do this wine and dine stuff. Now even with my biggest clients, is we go to lunch, and if you drink, then you're an alcoholic.
Right. So true.
Yeah, so maybe it'd be fun to kind of bring those back. It's like, we should go to dinner. I wonder what somebody would say. I haven't even tried. I've just been too nervous on it.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I find something that people aren't doing and I do it, it turns out to work. Sometimes it fails. I'll try it. You want to go to dinner?
Sure. You know, so it's starting off with an authentic relationship. The worst thing that happens is you have a friend.
That's the worst thing that happens.
That's the worst thing. You've started out with something that has nothing with monetary value to it. You create trust and a friendship. And if
the worst thing that happens is you're only friends and there's no money.
Ooh,
is that
that's
what you're
even
saying?
worse.
Okay.
No, you know, friendship builds trust, and as long as you're a person of your word, then trust follows friendship, right? And then from trust, then you're the go-to. It just happens. You become the go-to, either asking you to find someone for them, which is okay, fine. I'm not a fit for you, but I'll help you find someone for you. It always comes back. You know, I'm on this edge of kumbaya-ness where, you know, karma is real, and doing good for just doing good is the only way to do good. If you do it for some return, it's not going to come back. You know, it's selfless sharing, it's selfless friendship gets something back.
So in a way, karma, which I think is starting to be like accepted a bit more, I look at it as a little differently now as I continue to study different books instead of business books into more philosophy-based stuff. Just dove into Buddhism last night. And I'm like, wow, this is some crazy accurate stuff. I can't really talk about that because I just started. But I digress. Karma seems, just by the definition that I hear a lot, like do good and then you'll get good in return, just sounds selfish in its own right.
No. Well, what you just stated, though, is doing good to get good isn't the goal.
But isn't that what most people think of as karma? Or is that just a misperception?
Well, karma is about impact in your life, and good karma may look bad to someone because it's coming at you to solve a bigger problem than you have in the moment, right? So that's the mystique of it. You may lose your job, but it's because karma was opening up an opportunity for you, but it doesn't feel like good karma. So it's I just truly believe that this focus on just the selfless part of it, stuff happens. It just does, and it's the only way to prove it is look back in your life and say, when I did that and that was odd. Shortly after that, something else came my way, and whether there's a cause and effect that's obvious, the end result is as long as you're doing good, it doesn't matter because the effect's already there. I did something selfless. Wow, thanks to myself for doing something other than for myself,
right?
Other than thanking myself, right?
Yeah, you kind of get your own little burst of oxytocin when you do that kind of stuff.
Bingo. It's something about I think the body's built to do it that way, and if you do the opposite, then the body's built to receive the opposite, right?
Yeah, so I actually had an interesting experience with that on Saturday. So Ken Streeter was on the podcast on Friday.
Great podcast.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, he is author of Be the Good, which is very relevant to what we're talking about right now. And in it, he was not in the book, but when he was talking to me, he was just like, just do good without expecting anything. Like, go buy some flowers and give it to the cashier clerk, and they're $1.99 or whatever. And so I found myself in the grocery store, and this was right after, and I was just like, why not? I've never done anything like that. And so this was what was screwed up about it, is I looked at the flowers and I couldn't find the $1.99 one he was talking about. The cheapest thing was $5.99. And I was just like, I was sitting there just weighing the pros and cons, and I decided to do it, and it was a little weird. And I put it on the thing, and I was like, okay, what are you going to say? This lady, just give it to her and see what happens. And she goes, oh my God, really? I'm like, yeah, I just hope it brightens your day. And she's like, and she started crying. And I was just like, well, you're welcome. She's like, yeah, that's just so nice. Like, she wasn't sobbing, and tears are coming, everything like that. And then the other women in the checkout line were like, oh my God, that's so sweet. And I was just like, okay, yeah, happy day. And I kind of like got out of there. But I felt really, really good about it. Sure. And then I look back at that like, wow, I was really contemplating not doing that for $5.99.
And the feel good is worth a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, it's probably be worth $59, maybe even more. I was putting that monetary stamp on stuff. I was just kind of upset. Still am at myself on thinking in that way. I was putting monetary in front of oxytocin, and I have a ways to go. But anyway, that was a very successful thing. But Ken, they're $5.99. Okay, so I want to also jump into the article you published in Cascade Business News. So in it is mostly you're talking about bringing up the Industrial Revolution and how we lost jobs to gain more. But you mentioned that robotics will create more jobs. You think?
Yeah, I think so. Just like cars created more jobs instead of the horse industry, right? Which I think I highlighted in that article.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
What if it doesn't, though?
What if it doesn't?
Yeah.
Then we have to come up with other methods. I mean, we're already going towards a whole industry, a whole society built upon a reverse formula now. It used to be, a company wants to sell products to people that want to buy. They hire those out of that same pool of people to work at the company, and they get paid, and then the government makes money from mostly payroll and corporate taxes. Now we're getting to a model where, well, geez, if robots continue to trend and don't create the jobs that I'm hoping for, then it's we have to get to a base.
What are the jobs
income, you're BMI or gross median income? I'm sorry.
I agree with you on the BMI, but what a lot of people, including myself, will think like, I can see a few programming jobs being made, but will that really outweigh the amount?
Well, imagine the industry. So everyone focuses just on robotics, but if you pile any two of these trends together, there's whole new industries. So we forget that it's not about the robotics, that's a tool, but it's new industries that will be formed by the combining of that ability that we never had before in this kind of like mass production mode for the last, 2 decades, 3 decades roughly. And then we throw on top of that, 5G. Now we can do something that's managing robots on the moon, possibly, or mining, industrial mining without people on asteroids, because we have all this communication capability mixed with the robotics capability mixed with AI. Suddenly we're doing things we never imagined before, and that's where this value comes from. Is we have no concept where the technology is going to take us. There's whole new industries that didn't exist in 2000, and even in 2005. The iPhone came out in 2005, 7, somewhere around there, and we never imagined what that was going to transform as what new industries would be created to supply.
The app industry itself,
Right. So it's the same thing, and the more of these layers.
But when the iPhone was coming out, you didn't have people saying like that's a thing that's going to destroy so many industries. It was more people were seeing the creation of it.
Absolutely.
Where with automation, the problem that people are having with it. And I'm by the way, I'm going to be devil's advocate there.
I'll argue that the iPhone killed a lot of companies.
Well, sure. The cell phone itself killed the landline, right?
Well, think about all the devices that it carries that we used to buy and carry with us in our bag. And we used to have bags to carry it all, right?
Right, calculators,
you name it, pens, paper, whatever all those items were, day timers, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of those industries are, a fraction of what they used to be.
Yeah.
Pens. To this day, I can count the number of times a week I actually touch one. And it's mainly to sign checks.
And that'll be gone soon.
Yeah.
Why are you signing checks? You don't have direct deposit?
Oh, sure, we do direct deposits. Some checks because people refuse to accept things like that. So
oh, really? I don't have any of those.
Yeah, we have things that we have to sign checks for because they won't take it any other way.
I know.
So those industries all died, and we haven't calculated what that loss was from the iPhone. But every app that's added for $9.99 that replaced something that cost $50,000 before to implement. And you take one micro share of an application versus buying the application. Each of those industries or companies are phasing out, and something new is happening.
Right.
On a massive scale.
Right. This is a much larger scale. You're not talking about, okay, let's look at some calculators or pens that could be going out, or like paper, which is enough that you're disrupting basically the office supply business.
Right.
What we're talking about right now is disrupting everything. Right? Like truck driving, there's I forget which European country is now looking to use AI for judges. Like they can view it better, apparently.
Absolutely.
Obviously, the surgeon one's been talked a lot. I mean, just looking at AI already and what it's been doing to tax planners, like the rise of TurboTax. And H&R Block is just like, okay, this human model doesn't really work. We need to be going towards a TurboTax method, otherwise we're going to be smoked. And so you can start seeing how that can be a bit of a concern, especially, the one that gets brought up a lot is like the trucking industry. So there's 8 million truck drivers out there, and they make between like $45,000 and $120,000.
And there's 40 million males, mostly males, that drive something for a living, not just trucks.
Right.
40 million.
So taxi, Uber.
Name it.
And by the way, Uber and Lyft, why are they partnering to lobby for autonomous vehicles? It's not because they're looking out for all their human drivers. They're like, oh, we could find a way to not cut them in? That sounds great. So you have all that, and you kind of see where the other viewpoint comes on here, right? Like, well, what if it doesn't? And then the other thing that gets a little scary about this whole thing is when you have, did you watch Musk on Joe Rogan? Elon Musk?
I don't recall.
So there's a snippet of him. The whole conversation is like 4 hours, but you could find online. The whole thing's pretty fascinating. He is a pretty socially awkward guy, but boy, is he intelligent. I don't agree with his business practices, but I digress. There's a 25-minute clip about him and AI, and basically he was going around for years lobbying to Congress and businesses, governors, presidents, met with Obama, all telling them, like, slow this down.
Yeah.
And nobody listened to him, nor is. And Trump just signed something basically progressing AI. And you can't really fault Trump or businesses too much at it, because across the bigger pond of the Pacific, China is not letting up, and neither is Russia. So it's basically like, who can get this power first?
They built a city for AI, right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a complex where they've hired, God, what was the number? 10,000 PhDs. The last I heard, it's probably a lot more than that now.
China? Or we're talking about Russia?
China. And have designated, an area within a city as the AI, city. And they plan to dominate, and they will. I mean, they are on a map to far exceed us on AI.
Yeah.
They're the first that did quantum communication link for security between a satellite and the Earth. They are not wasting any time, and we are. We're wasting a lot of time right now, and we're not funding federally like we should be, like we used to propel just raw research in that kind of category. We need to up that pretty dramatically.
So, in order to compete with China, and so here's the thing, I agree with you, but this is what Musk is warning about.
Oh, sure.
He's just like, once you let it out of the box, once you let the genie out of the bottle, it's too late.
It's already out. It's already out.
Well, you could argue that with, you can actually, I've heard people, futurists or like people in AI in this field, talk a bit about the argument that it is already out, and it's corporations, and there's algorithms within current corporations today, and the algorithms that are built in them, basically humans are in them as like holding positions, but they're made to make money, and that's what the algorithm does. And so the algorithm has these huge corporations, like, we just need to make quarterly profits, and that's what it does. And in the case, a lot of them destroy the earth or get people killed via pharmaceuticals or whatever.
Sure.
It is.
Yeah, I totally agree with not only him, it was Bill Gates and people like Stephen Hawking, God rest his soul, that were saying, hey, this is going way too fast. I tend to be the optimist on this, is that, sure, there will be massive disruption. Going back to the car, when it went from 8,000 cars to 20 million over a period of just a decade, and the same thing a little over a decade. And the horses had the opposite. There were 20 million horses, and you couldn't find one on the streets of New York after 1920. It was really hard to find a horse. So, and that was massively disruptive. I mean, all the industries that failed, just like we're seeing JCPenney's, thanks to e-commerce, all
Sears,
these kind of
Toys R
stores
Us,
like that, they're all failing because they haven't changed the model, or their models are totally outmoded, and there's no way to save them. And that's the other big thing, is corporations are so invested in their models, even when everything's pointing to death.
Yeah, it's
Kodak,
funny, on the
digital, right?
Blockbusters meeting, and there's a board meeting, and the minutes are written down talking about Netflix, and the guys on the board, based on the model that you're talking about, said they wove in this story together, and they all universally agreed to basically not do nothing about it, because they said people enjoy seeing their neighbor and going to Blockbuster and feeling it, and they want that experience, so we're fine. I'm like, yeah, or I can lay in bed naked and hit play. Like, there's a bit of a difference there.
Absolutely.
And when it came to ease, so you have these models.
So let me get back to the triangle, though. So, the old methodology, I work for you, you pay me, then I go buy products, some of which might be yours, and the government makes money.
Yeah.
Right. I forget what percentage of our GDP, but the vast majority of our GDP is consumer spending, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now robots are coming in. Foxconn in, I think it's Illinois, wherever they are putting up this massive complex, they're talking about investing billions, and they're going to create 11,000 jobs. And they came back, well, after they got all the tax breaks, obviously, it's not going to be 11,000 jobs. It's going to be a lot of robots. oh, really? How many people? So they're talking about hundreds, maybe 1,000 technicians, etc. So you're right. If we look at manufacturing, what robots are going to do, it's already happening. We see it. Look at the warehouses, what Amazon's doing with robots. It's happening. We're going to get to the point where there isn't a human in there picking anything, putting it in a box. So those industries are
as
easy
you
to see.
mentioned, a lot of that's also happening when it comes to.
And then there will be fights, just like in autonomous vehicles. There will be a massive reaction that will fight this, and it's inevitable. So they will be able to postpone it like they have on any kind of disruptive technology like this. They'll be able to postpone it for a while until eventually unions or whoever's trying to protect those jobs are faced with the hard reality. They just can't do it anymore.
Kind of like taxis battle
Right.
against Uber.
Yeah, exactly. So, what we have to look at is the societal change of having to change how money goes to state, how people live, how they buy the things or acquire the things. Let's get rid of the word buy. Acquire the things that they need to keep their standard of living. And so the model is going to reverse. Instead of, companies are going to pay the government taxes based on, maybe we tax the robots, which is part of the things that's going on now.
Robot tax.
Well, one robot replaces 4 humans. So we tax it 4 times what we would have charged a person, right?
Get that payroll tax.
And then
coming
the
in. government
government then pays people to consume,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It all sounds like negative, but
No, it's socialism.
here's the optimist in me that frees up people to do things that right now, AI and robotics aren't the best at yet, and that's creativity. We're going to open the doors for those people who have been stymied with 8-hour grunge days, working at the same place and coming home and feeling exhausted, to do something creative. The worst case is they sit on their ass and they play video games. Best case is they realize they're free to go do something that really calls to them. Art, science, research, whatever it is. Create objects, create companies, on and on and on. And so my hope is that a large part of the population rises to the challenge and, yes, takes that 70,000 or 80,000, 100,000 they get from the government and does something with it besides, spending it on objects to put in their homes. So that's, and then, it's this layering though. It's the layering of everyone focuses on one technology.
Does that bug you though? What you're saying? I mean, because you've made all your successes in a capitalist economy, right? All your monetary successes.
I don't think there's any. I think it will free millions to do capitalistic things.
Is it took you
Creative things,
Right.
capitalistic things. Creativity to me is, in my form, is business. That's my creative outlet.
Mm-hmm.
For others, it might be art or something else.
No, I understand. I'm fully with you. But I was just wondering, like, when did you start thinking this way? Because it seems that you go from, and this is actually, I'm not going to play devil's advocate anymore. This is the way I've gone to thinking, too. I'm like, there is no slowing this thing down.
There isn't. Yeah.
So how are we going to get the government and our society ready for it to flourish? We could either be like the Terminator one day or like Star Trek. It's really up to us on how we end up adopting this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you start thinking in this way of bring it on, let's do it in this way, and it'll be great, as opposed to we have to learn how to see the other viewpoint, which the majority, I think, is on, which is we have to stop this at all costs, which I think is futile.
I have to say that, I was involved in at the Advanced Technology Center at Pricewaterhouse, decades ago, and they were doing research, neural network programming, on and on and on,
Mm-hmm.
very early on, and it was nascent. So that they had the understanding, but they didn't have the processing power or the bandwidth to put that out into the world. That was the biggest limit, is you had to do it on these massive systems, but getting it piped to someplace to have any good was, the cloud wasn't really there at that time. It was pretty early on where we had to do the phone connect to make an internet connection. So
What year
the
was that?
technology didn't get, the technology wasn't there to really make AI happen. So it's been a long cycle until all the other technologies could catch up.
Okay.
Right? bandwidth technologies, on and on, processing power, memory, storage, on and on. So just that's like today. So if you look at what we have AI, robotics, we've got 3D printing, all these different things that are trends. If you look at each one individually, you can see the narrow impact. Like robotics will replace manufacturing folks, right? AI will replace white collar analysts sitting at desks collecting information and processing data. All these kind of things. But if you layer AI with robotics, with communication, with power, where we can have serious power thrown up pretty quickly in remote locations, I mean, it opens up a phenomenal amount of ideas about what we can put in the middle of Botswana, right? At price points that constantly are dropping exponentially, right? Power is dropping exponentially. Everything is, right? Cloud costs. So I see this opportunity, and putting a device that is Star Trek, the communicator, in the hands of over 5 billion people now.
Right.
We're projecting within a decade or so that 7 billion will have one.
There's like African towns that have smartphones that don't have running water or electricity.
They're still carrying water from the
panels.
river, yeah. So it's that kind of leap. In the article, I talked about the impact that most of us don't even think about, and this isn't my original idea. I follow a guy named Peter Diamandis at Singularity University. And he's actually involved with Elon Musk, with SpaceX, and a few other things. He's one of the folks that I follow. And he talks about this and accessing genius. And so I went and did some research. Well, how many geniuses do they predict are in the world? There's 30 to 40 million of them. Problem is, most of them are born in huts in northern India or Borneo. And so they're this brilliance. Imagine Einstein being born on an island in the Philippines with no power.
Yeah, no further education to push them.
Exactly. Yeah. So with the phone, connecting these folks and actually giving them enough stuff on the phone itself.
Well, as long as they have the internet, I think it's
right.
Yeah.
They can research, they can engage, they can socialize, they can promote their ideas like never before. So we had this unintended consequence that makes me very optimistic that, geez, one man, Einstein, look what he did to change the world, positive and negative. His discovery was neutral. It's our choice of what we do with it. And that's the same thing with robotics, with 3D printing, with CRISPR and DNA. It's our choice of what we do with it. That's the moral and ethic part that everyone's worried about. Who's going to build that into the robots, and who's going to cheat and not do it, right?
Yeah.
So that's the pessimistic side. Is it's not so much about our humankind adapting to these technologies. It's adapting to the ethics and morals that go with these things to make sure that systems don't do things that we don't want them to do.
Well, if they're programmed to just
to
make
kill.
money, but a byproduct of just making money could be
Absolutely, yeah.
kill, death. I mean, it is already. Like pharmaceutical companies, they literally budget in when they launch a new drug for the lawsuits.
Right.
It's like a line item of P&L with marketing expenses like lawsuit expense. So we'll probably kill like 3,000 people, and here's the class action, and then we still make a huge profit.
Sure.
That's true. So, and that's because it's designed to make money.
Until a machine shows up, which, by the way, all the elements are getting close to this. A machine that shows up that says it's your personal doctor machine that sits in your home, that knows your DNA and pinpricks to find out what's going on, like me right now with allergies, and it does all the diagnoses and comes up and spits out a pill for me, right? And what the charge is no longer on the pill, it's the machine that makes it. And then you add the base ingredients and out comes whatever you need. So I can see a future where this technology, as it leaps forward and leaps forward, these industries like pharmaceuticals will be caught off guard when systems can process solutions that are tailor-made to a human so that it doesn't kill me.
Don't you
for
think?
pennies.
I mean, from our conversation, it seems like UBI, Universal Basic Income. Do you see it as being like really one of the only answers with all?
I don't know how else to get around it. everyone's freaked out about socialism except it's democratic socialism. And we already have socialism. Most people don't see our tax basis as socialism, which we build roads for everyone, not just for Tom, Dick, and Harry. So it's this idea of getting paid for doing nothing. Well, no, actually, there's a purpose. You need to buy things, because if robots replace everyone, then and no one's there to buy, then everything crashes. So the incentive for a consumerist economy like us is to pay people to buy things. Hopefully, it means pay people to do things. I want to twist this: do things that are out of the bounds of technology, thinking new thoughts, writing new books. Hopefully, lots of science fiction writers, because almost everything comes out of science fiction. It's all been, written about before. Open up the imagination to human capability of imagining us expanding beyond the galaxy. And what does that take? An Elon Musk, a Bezos, Branson, all these folks that are leaping off the earth without governments for altruistic reasons. I mean, there's not a profit to be made for a long time with any of those endeavors.
But how are you going to get, how can people end up seeing that in the same way? Like, how do you get an entire country to move behind this idea when they fight socialism so much, all of a sudden be like, hey, yeah, we need the universal basic income in order to survive, and then the main argument back is like, well, let's just destroy the machines.
Well, again, I'm trying to be optimistic. I think our partisan politics, the way our democracy is defined now, means other countries are going to surpass in this change, because they're willing to make change rapidly. There isn't partisanship for my little neighborhood. It's joining together for the greater purpose of a country or the planet. Hopefully, the planet. And I don't know, the U.S. the way it's designed and how the population is divided, we could be screwed. And so it means it's going to happen anyway, is whether what chaos happens in the meantime.
Yeah, it's like if we're all speaking Chinese in like 40 years.
Or we all say no to autonomous trucks, and suddenly everyone else in the world is except us. And so they have better economies of scale, so they get the e-commerce. It's all these factors that are coming to play. They're going to force us one way or another, because someone's going to adopt it.
Right.
China already sees this problem. They already know that when Foxconn talks about replacing that one weekend, they replaced 23,000 people with robots over a weekend, right? And they had a staff of 300 to maintain it. That is the trend. And so they realize that social unrest for them is their biggest threat, which is as factories go to automation for profit and for quality and everything else, 24/7
especially manufacturing, because that's the majority of the freaking economy. It's just like stuff that says made in China that we have.
So what are they going to do with millions of millions of people without any job?
You pay them to make sure they don't go into a revolution, right?
Or you find something else for them to do that might be more altruistic for the state. I don't know what that is.
Right.
Go back to school, graduate, go into our research centers, and think out the new technologies ahead of everyone else in the world. That is already happening, right? So that to me is, education still is the route for humanity to stay above the curve, and then learning how to, as a society and as a planetary society, figure out how to put a common rule book in place for these technologies, like DNA, that guy that China arrested because he experimented on a baby embryo, with CRISPR and gene splitting, and so we've got to elevate the game on coming up with a common rule set.
It's also fascinating, like how the mind can start thinking differently, and perhaps we could cultivate other geniuses, like you're saying, is AI, by working with it, the ones that exist today, and as they continue to evolve, can help us learn how to think differently. So Google's AlphaGo that beat the world grandmaster
in
2016, I believe. He ended up beating him 4-1. By he, I mean the AlphaGo beat the man 4-1. And the first 3, he was doing, I keep on saying, it was doing stuff. I don't know how he self-identifies, or it self-identifies. The machine was doing things that Lee, the AlphaGo master, had never seen before. Completely ridiculous stuff. So basically the whole concept of Go which is a game that's been around, it's the oldest board game that's still been continuously played for 2,500 years. And you basically, it's a game of kind of war, it's just territory, and you have all these pieces, and you basically try to conquer as much territory as possible. And there's a lot of strategies of just like flanking and dividing in, and it's a pretty fascinating game. But it's also one of the most complex games known, arguably the most complex game known. And
simplest to learn to start and the hardest to master.
Right. And so actually what Google did is they had AlphaGo play itself for some time, and it learned all these different things. And so when it went up against a human, it was basically doing these moves that seemed amateur. Yeah. So it'd be flanking sides, or it would be putting things against the wall that would just kill it, but then it opened up this whole new thing, and then the machine would take over. So as this was going on, Lee was just like, oh my gosh, I've never even thought of it this way. And then on game 4, he beat the AlphaGo, because he used its methods against him, and it basically drove a wedge into the middle of like this huge defense. It's like, why would you do that? And everybody looked at it like, that's stupid, they're just all going to die. But it opened up to victory, and it made the AI make some amateur moves after that, and Lee won. And then the game after that, AlphaGo learned what Lee did and destroyed him. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of interesting facts about Go. One is there are more moves than there are atoms in the universe.
Really?
Yeah. So,
really, I never heard
checkers, that. You can learn, and a system can learn through just rote, memorization of all the possible moves, and then choosing the best of those possible.
And then chess is a little bit up.
Chess is further up, but it's still within a range of calculable outcomes of like 200 million or something like that. And then you talk about Go, and there are so many zeros that follow it, it's impossible. So when you talk to Go masters like Lee and others who play the game, it's intuition. And so when,
but the intuition, the argument is that you have an intuition of feeling on how things are going after you play it so many times, and you just kind of have an idea, and you kind of see it. But in order to actually compute up to 50 moves ahead, which is what AlphaGo was at least doing at that point, like perfectly, as far as minds that we have today, it seems to exceed them, unless there's a baby in Africa that is a genius.
So Lee said in that interview about his experience with AlphaGo was that he felt like he was playing God. Playing against God.
Oh, playing against God, okay.
His moves, Lee's moves, must feel like an ant's moves, kind of feeling with God. It's that, the ability for AI to build its own algorithms, by the way. It built its own algorithms to the point where the Google researchers couldn't figure out exactly how it's playing, because it's billions of calculations that go into the algorithm. So it's literally would take us hundreds, if not thousands of years to go and analyze one game.
Yeah, you can see how Musk is like, you're letting the genie out of the bottle.
Right. On the other hand, that means that we've created something that's smarter than us. And isn't that the goal of parents, is to create kids that are smarter than us anyway? So we have created something substantially smarter, to the point where what we have to instill now in all of the embedded chips in these AI systems is a sense of morality and ethics, and that even though at some point it would look at us like ants in what we do, it looks like it has some intelligence, but if I step on one, it doesn't change the universe, right?
Yeah.
That somehow we have to keep that embedded. That remember to respect your masters.
Well, I learned
even when you're smarter than your masters.
Yeah, after studying how those games went with AlphaGo, I saw some good from AI when there's nothing but bad press. I'm like, it can all of a sudden teach us a different way of thinking. As
Sure.
this guy who's been playing all his life, all of a sudden tried different things that he never did before he even thought of because it just seemed foolish. But it opened up different stuff, and he ended up beating God in that third game. That must have felt
Sure.
pretty awesome, and then get destroyed the next because he learned what he did, and that was the end of that.
And then Google, with Google Translate,
Mm-hmm.
is an example of an intelligence doing something extremely good, which the researchers didn't understand until they saw some patterns. That was like, wow, what's going on? I think they brought in some outside folks, maybe from MIT, or I can't remember the story exactly, and they mapped out what it was doing, and essentially it came up with its own meta language that it was able to translate any language to any language.
Really?
So that's awesome. So it can now adapt a new language extremely quickly, and start learning very, very quickly based on this meta language it created. Yet, if you ask anyone how it did it, we can't follow all the decisions it made along the way. It's billions of them. So it created on its own for greater good.
Sure. And then you have, but then you can understand just from our conversation here over the past 2 minutes of the so many algorithms and moves and calculations that the programmers didn't even know what was going on.
And have embedded bias.
Right. Of course, because how could you not? You have some sort, even when you say you have to put in morality, well, morality changes amongst different cultures,
Sure, yeah.
right? There's an underlying human constitution of doing good, but people skew that for different ways. People justify to themselves why it's good for the end goal to be money.
Sure, it's good
Right.
for me versus it's good for everyone.
Exactly, but if they justify to themselves that it is correct, and if they truly believe that, they're going to code it in there, and they might think they are completely good, and just most of the
Sure.
time they always do. Most people think in all their decisions they are correct, right?
Mhm.
It's just one flaw and brilliant thing about humans. So you kind of understand through our conversation here that when Musk is saying, you gotta watch it. The look on his face is one of sincere concern as he's talking about this, as he was trying to lobby, talking about the genie coming out of the bottle. And he started to mention, like, these calculations, it's far, like, these algorithm changes, like what we're talking about, if left unchecked, could just basically end up hitting the singularity, and we're not even quite sure what that can end up being. But if it ends up being bad, it'll be way too late. Way
Sure.
too late, because there's nobody regulating it. And he brought up the example of seatbelts. So when cars first started coming out and people were dying all the time, it took 10 years for the government to approve seatbelts. You had the auto lobbyists all pushing against, saying that it's safe, and then finally it came together after all this stuff, and they put in seatbelts and saved tons of lives. And I think everybody could agree that seatbelts was a good idea. That took 10 years after it was already a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So now, once AI is already a problem, it's like that's when it's too late. You're making all these calculations that we're talking about where you can't even follow it, and it's 10 years later. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, I agree. And another thing to look at, although talk about controversy, let's look at technology like even guns that have been around for a long time.
Going down the gun road?
Yeah,
Let's go down the gun road.
It was mainly in the venue of there was a purpose to the gun, either for survival, catching your food, or gathering together as an army to protect yourself against some foreign group. When guns became recreational, and purpose started disappearing, going hunting for deer that you actually ate, right? Just like fishing and actually eating the fish kind of thing. Now it's recreation. So the connections that validated the purpose.
Well, people still hunt, eat the deer.
Some
catch a
people do.
fish. Yeah, a
The
lot
vast
of people.
majority don't.
Well, when you
So
talk about recreation, you're saying just people going to shooting practice.
Or hunting for the sake of hunting versus hunting for a meal. That's my point. My dad's side of the family is from the Ozarks, where I was down there, and what they went and hunted, we were eating.
Right.
Kind of thing afterwards. So it's that disconnection of purpose. Suddenly, guns lose their moral grounding, as an object. Right now, it's suddenly, well, what are guns for? Right, kind of thing. So
Well, you have the argument of protection
Yeah,
for your
and-
family, and then you have the argument of most people want to shooting each other in a house with a gun.
Right. And so, the moral grounding of things, the ethical things, the purpose, the societal purpose. Why do we put seatbelts in? Why do I care whether you get killed or not? It's because, in statistics, there's kids in that car we do care about, right? They have a future that would impact our society. It's all these other things that started hitting, because there was a big pushback against seatbelts.
Oh, yeah.
You're trying to control me inside my car, right? It's the same thing until people realize, the society benefit, insurance, the cost of it, the lost productivity of people who don't exist anymore. All these things came in to support it. So, and I think the same thing will happen right now. It's like we're going to have societal impact, and we're going to have people extremely upset and people starving because they can't make a living for a while, and the government will not be capable of reacting fast enough to put a net over these folks that robotics and AI and everything else is replacing, until we figure out, what do we have people do now?
Well, that's the question, right? What do you have people do when you give them universal basic income, and you'll have, when it comes to the way my mind works, which I think is kind of similar to yours, I can take a vacation for a certain amount of time, but then I start getting antsy.
Yeah,
I want to build
golf.
something.
Yeah.
And I always want to be like contributing. And so if I were just sitting at my house watching Netflix, or even just, I love mountain biking, but if I was just mountain biking every single day and it wasn't contributing to helping other people, I wouldn't feel fulfilled, and I would probably get pretty depressed, even though I was doing what I loved.
And that's where I think we can be creative with how the government interacts with those people. That money comes with some kind of objective. Choose a path. Here's public service as a path, and you can choose any of these 1,000 different public service things that you can do for the greater good for that money. Here's a creativity. Have an output with creative assets coming out, whatever that means. Research. All these different categories that we could actually incent people to say, well, if you go to a university to get an advanced degree in something, well then, we'll give you an extra $20,000 or an extra $30,000 to cover those costs.
To pivot a little bit, you were mentioning putting in ethics and morals within to the machines and whatnot, but not even talking about just
the laws
machines.
of robotics.
Yeah, but pivoting from the robots a little bit, do you have any core philosophies that you basically operate off of?
Sure, but I have a convoluted sense of philosophies. So, they're chosen by a variety of different things. My life path, my business path, my faith path. All those things intertwined to come up with my own unique set, right? So mine's.
What's Preston's unique set?
It all boils down to doing the right thing, and people use it all the time. The question is, do they follow it? It's like, do the right thing. Think beyond yourself. Do it or get out of the way. So once you decide to do something, with Yoda, do or do not get. There is no try. And I love Lee Iacocca. Lead, follow, or get out of the way.
So, what about for those people that would ask, well, what is the right thing?
Well, you got to come up to your own framework. I tend to be, is it a libertarian? But basically is, no one can tell me how to think. I have to get there with you. So telling someone to do, these are what are right things. And some things we all agree on, don't steal, don't cheat, all the kind of basics. But
sure.
Then right gets to a very esoteric level of, right in what circumstance, right in my life, right in whatever. And I have a hard time dictating to others how they should live a right life. But if it doesn't resonate and in the society you're in, then chances are you're probably not doing, quote, the right thing. And in some cases, it needs to be a disruptive. Like, example is, everyone says, well, geez, our city, we don't need outside thought. society itself within our little town can come up with what's right and wrong. Well, that's how the South felt back in the 40s and 50s.
Sure.
It took an outside force saying, hey, you're wrong.
Right.
And even though you're the vast majority, we're going to shake it up and tell you it's, the universe knows this is wrong. There's certain things the universe just compels people to realize is wrong.
How do you deal on a daily or weekly basis when going into business or personal life? Somebody that is basically portraying arrogance and they're looking out for themselves, and it's just very, very obvious as to what the motivations are.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with that?
Well, it depends on the circumstance. If it's, they won't gravitate to being friends of mine.
Sure.
So, on to me, the most important thing is there's billions of people. I can select who I look up to, who I mentor, on and on, and who I work with,
Mm-hmm.
and who I do business for. And so, our company has its own rule about no assholes. We don't, we want folks that play right, do right, because it could affect the outcome of the project.
Sure.
Right? I mean, so we always are looking at, are these the kind of folks that we would like to play in a sandbox with? We have a choice, thank goodness,
How do you detect the assholes in your interview process?
Well, you said some of those things. Do they listen?
Mm-hmm.
Are they focused on themselves? I, me, I kind of discussion versus we, team, outcome, what their customers need. If that's the discussion, then those are indicators that this might go right. But we're always vetting out, who we play with, partners that we play with. If they're just chasing the dollar, that's probably not a partner that we normally are going to
work with.
play with. We want to play with someone who's got something beyond that in their playbook.
So I guess then you've made some bad hires.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so have I. How
I
do you
made
deal?
some-
How do you deal with one of the people that I was just kind of talking about, that person who's not the fit for the business, but they're in now.
This is, everyone asks this question, and there's probably 10,000 ways of looking at it depending on the circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Does your right compass gravitate? Because there's the argument towards firing them right
Well,
away, and there's the argument
hire
towards
slow,
teaching.
fire fast.
Yeah.
If they're not a fit, the sooner you get rid of it, the less impact that they have on the corporation and the people and
Mm-hmm.
everything. But in some cases, they're super critical, and you're weighing, oh, geez, to replace this person, it's so disruptive. It could get us off rails, and yet, that allows me to accept these behaviors that I don't want. That mental math that you're doing, it's hard for anyone on the outside to really judge what's right in that moment.
Sure.
Typically, you'd want to start either figuring out a way that this person can change, which is
Mm-hmm.
typically not, and then an exit plan for them. So it ends up positive for both, right?
And then specific to Ben, since we're talking about hiring, a question just kind of popped up in my head is, we've talked about this, and I'd like to get your 2 cents, because I think the last time we talked about this was probably a year ago, and it's Bend was a place of companies that really looked out for each other. I still kind of see it like that, but I do see where you're coming from when there is some more sniping of talent from one another. Sniping of clients from one another is something that I've dealt with from time to time, where I actually used to not. Do you see a way of writing that? Or is it just a thing that happens when a town gets bigger?
I believe that there's a way to build culture with
For a
growth.
city or a town?
It doesn't
I mean,
matter
for a
whether
city
it's
or a business.
Whether it's a city or a business or nonprofit or whatever it is, I think it's the same formula. And that's the hard part is remembering that culture is not static,
Mhm.
right? And that's hard for people. people who were born here have an idea of what culture is.
Right.
People who moved here 30 years ago, 20 years, 10, 5.
Well, people don't like change, right?
Right, yeah, so they all have their own perception. Actually, most of the people who are railing against that I talk to about growth in town are the ones who've moved here most recently in the last 3 years, 4 years.
That are against it?
That are against growth.
Huh?
Because they're trying to frease what they think Bend is. And
Yeah,
you just can't do that. You
No.
can't freeze anything.
It's like
you freeze
freezing
it, you
AI.
die.
Yeah, exactly.
So everyone says, "Oh, the culture is bad." It says, "Well, culture is constantly evolving. Are you participating in its evolution or not? Or are you static, sitting in a house complaining?" And so, to me, culture is about activism. Getting involved in the culture creates the culture, and it's always evolving. And
you're the poster child for that.
God,
You're
I would
involved
hope that
so
I'm in
much
that
stuff.
group of folks that are doing that.
You absolutely are. And I think a lot of people end up looking up to you in that way, and more people need to be doing that, including myself. I get involved in the public a little bit, but compared to you, I'm not even a blip on the radar. So I think I can learn from that. And like, hey, I'm not somebody that has a "Bend sucks, don't move here" bumper sticker, and I won't be. The town's growing, and I think that's great for multiple reasons. What I would like to see with my old man hat on, like, oh, we need to stay like this, is I do appreciate the business culture that is still here, but I just sense it
changing.
Well,
and that's the same thing, up till about 5-6 years ago.
And that's just the culture of don't screw other companies, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, because they're people. They're not just companies. Like, people are behind that. So
the idea is to impart on 100 some odd thousand folks we have today, this sense of unified culture, and that it's still, no matter what size we get to, it's too small to do something bad in town and think you can get away with it. When the town was 50,000 when I first moved in, most people who moved in with a purpose, lifestyle, and then they either brought it, built it, right, or worked remotely. One of those three options were the only options in Bend.
Sure.
There were very few jobs to take. You created them, basically.
Right.
And that entrepreneurial spirit is what...
Or you could be a realtor.
Or you could be a realtor. and that entrepreneurial spirit is what really resonated for a long time, until about 5-6 years ago, when people actually could move here for a job. And that changed attitude to some extent of, well, what's the ecosystem like? Can I get another job? Where most people moved here and said, okay, I'm moving there because the lifestyle, and now I got to figure out how to make a living. Right. So we have that massive halo of that entrepreneurial spirit of build it, bring it, etc. And we're still imparting that kind of enthusiasm and thought process to the rest. And by the way, don't build it on the bodies of your neighbors. Build it on the shoulders of, work with them. Don't compete with them. And even if you have a competitive product, the idea is, think bigger than your neighbor. Think bigger than the town. Think about where you're going to grow to, and that we want to bring in lots of talent to grow all of us, and all boats lift, right? So, and I think we still have it. The hard part, and I keep harping on this, is find ways to tell those folks that are following you what the hope is for culture, and then show it by doing it. Wave someone through a circle, pick up trash, you help the lady across the street. What I do a lot is, someone calls me and I don't have a job, I don't let them just, hey, sorry. No, I call around and I see if I can find someone to listen to that person, because we want those folks coming in.
Where does where does somebody start on getting involved to the degree you do? I'm sure you know plenty of areas that can use some help when it comes to whether opportunity knocks, or the list goes on and on with you. But
there's more nonprofits in this town. If you want to start there, then you can shake a stick at. At last count, it's over 1,000 or something like that in Bend metro area. So there's named a category of anything that you have an inkling for, whether it's the outdoors. Dozens of them, right? Nature Conservancy, all the way down. And then if it's about kids, We have tons of places that kids are desperate for, mentorship or help or money or whatever. And then if it's really, not your gig to do nonprofits, that's fine. Then, there's plenty of businesses that need help. Mentoring, advising, getting on the board, finance, whatever it might be. There's so many ways to give. I would say the way you find it, the right one, is to figure out what your own passion is. That's where you actually get to do the passion without burning it out.
Right.
Because, photography is a passion for a lot of folks, and it's the last thing they should do is create a business around it, because you're going to build a business you hate.
Right.
Yeah. And that translates back to your own love of photography, is because it's no longer about expression, it's now about paying the bills.
Right.
So, building something you love, doing something you love, outside of your money-making, schemes.
What would you like to see Ben look like by 2030, in 10 years?
Multicultural.
Let's break that down really quick. Multicultural. What way?
Multicultural, a very diverse economic, socioeconomic demographic. So, we have people like baristas living in town. This is my fear of growth, is that the city doesn't build, the citizens won't let the city build, because the city's already there,
Right.
to build mixed-use kind of developments that allows baristas to live in the same building as, say, a middle-class family has a whole floor, and then a penthouse suite that's at the top of a millionaire who's helping to pay the costs for those baristas to have a decent place to live at a price point they can afford.
Instead of living and commuting from Redmond or La Pine
So the
or
last thing we
Prineville.
want is to end up like an Aspen, where only the wealthy live in town and everyone's commuting in and miserable.
Okay, so that's morally the right thing to do, but that's not where it's going.
Well, it is. I mean, we're seeing the first mixed-use developments popping up. So the city is behind it, and as long as it meets
The Ben
the
2030
rules,
project.
citizens are still fighting every single piece of development.
Right.
Not in my backyard kind of mentality. The high-rise that was supposed to be on the COCC campus on the corner in Valhalla neighborhood fought that. There was no reason to really fight that. Their fears were not justified.
What were their fears?
Well, it's just, we're going to have this tall building with a lot of people that we don't know at socioeconomic rates that we don't know living next door to us. That, the fear was there about who. It's not about the building. It's never about the building. It's about who's in the building.
Why are people afraid of other people?
The campus, when we...
That was a war and a half.
Oh, yeah. It was the same fear, is I don't know these folks. They're college kids. I hear they party their asses off, and my neighborhood's going to be filled with these, and they're going to ruin the neighborhood. That never happened. We already had people that age living in those neighborhoods. They just weren't going to college.
Sure.
So it's, this fear is about people that don't act, talk, or look like us, right?
Which in Bend is what, white?
Yeah. 12% of Central Oregon is Hispanic. That's the next biggest one. And then it jumps down to like 0.5 and 1% for all the others. It's basically, white and then Hispanic is a backup. And most of those Hispanics stay hidden in their own culture because they don't feel welcome, right? They're in fear. So, so I would hope for a mixed-use development with the ability to allow people to stay regardless of their income levels, that we find a way to make that housing work for them so that they stay close to where they work, and we keep that culture. It's rich that way. The conversations I have with baristas tends to be about art and lifestyle than it is in outdoors than it is about business, right?
Sure.
And that enriches me. So that's one hope, too, is that we can't make us diverse. We have to be attractive enough to be diverse, right?
We can't... Wait, say that again?
We can't say, we're going to make ourselves highly diverse. So, I attend a lot of these inclusion and diversity kind of discussions. And the bottom line, most of them is, I feel like the meetings are bullshit, because the reality is we have to be attractive to them to come in. And so, part of attraction is getting rid of this unconscious bias that we talk about. We say things, we do things, we write job postings a certain way that doesn't appeal to them, and recognizing that not every ethnic group loves to ski as our Visit Bend promotion, right, or to mountain bike. So we have to look at all these things. So I hope for a very diverse culture that's very rich, that has a reach outside of the area, meaning traded sector companies that bring ideas in that are out, so that we don't end up in like some isolated industry like lumber used to be, right? It was very isolated. That we have an inbound and outbound culture mix of inbound, and then we send our culture out and say, hey, we think we're doing some things right. You might want to learn from our community, how to be a ski town.
Sure. Or how to do it without turning into an Aspen.
Yeah.
Right? If we can't
or
prove that
city
out.
of assholes.
Yeah, that too, right? So last question would be, if you took your mind right now and dropped it into your 18-year-old self, what would you do?
Wow. I would have pursued more creative. I hate to use the words because as I'm saying them, it sounds so corny. More creative, spiritual, and humanistic pursuits than I did. And yet I love where I am.
Right.
But I feel that if I've cheated myself of an experience is spending more of my time doing the kind of stuff I'm doing now. I wish I would have been socially involved
when you were
at an
much
early age.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have a sense of community. I grew up overseas as an Army brat, moving every 3 months to 3 years roughly, and so the idea of place was wherever I was.
Sure.
And only until I moved to Bend did I have a real sense of place. Right? This is home kind of feeling.
So you have like the this is home kind of feeling here, and then you start getting involved in so if that started happening here and now you're so passionate about, like you're saying, that if you dropped your brain into your 18-year-old self, that you start getting involved right away, what drives it? What made that decision? Why did you choose that and not like, I would not be getting so upset about certain decisions, I would have looked this way in business, and because then that company would have been so much bigger, but instead you went towards like this idea of community, which doesn't really have that big monetary thing attached to it.
No, it's not about the money, and that's God, I'm an entrepreneur, and I would love to have some more exits so I can make up for all the losses, but at the same time, though, when I'm in something and it's not about the money, that's when it feels rich and alive, pops me out of bed. As soon as it just becomes a focus of making money, that's not enough to keep my engine running. Maybe for a short spurt or something, but that day in, day out, wake up in the morning and how do I feel? I want to do something that has nothing to do with money. I want to do something that's has an impact. Right now, the impact is I have a company that I hire families, and I'm taking care of families, not employees.
Okay.
And so I see that as part of my personal mission is, growing a company for the families that work with us, and it's definitely family. What happens in the home affects work and vice versa. So
are you talking about that for 5 Talent?
For 5 Talent,
yeah. So can you explain that really? Are you like interviewing families, or are you just looking at each person as?
No, it's that when we hire, we feel a responsibility that this is not an employee filling a job slot. This is a human with a family and lots of things happening outside of work.
What if they have a ton of potential and they don't have a family yet?
Either way.
Yeah.
Either way. It's whatever is driving them to happiness outside, we need to not be a barrier to it inside our company, right?
Right.
So flex schedules, and if a lot of what our folks want is to learn things, which we push. The new skill is, how fast can you adapt to change? It's really the skill that's going to make everyone succeed in the future and now. So we encourage this kind of training at the cost of the company, a big cost of the company, because it fulfills them and makes them a target for Amazon or Google to hire away from us. But that's just the game we play.
Well, with these altruistic things you're talking about, they seem all fun and good. I mean, yeah, okay, let's like hire families and being involved in the community is what gets me out of bed, and it's not really chasing
Sure.
about my dollar. By the way, I get it. Kind of. I'm learning. What do you say to somebody, which is the majority of the population, who thinks that their problems will go away and they'll be happy as soon as they are a millionaire?
Yeah, all they have to do is go look at the
Because
research
you
on-
have, well, yeah, but this is coming from somebody who has been there. You have made a ton of money. You are doing well now, but
lost a ton of money.
you've lost, but you've been there. Like you were telling me stories about the Porsche days and stuff like that, and that sort of fulfillment. That was when you're a lot younger, and I didn't know you then, but I have a pretty good feeling that you're a bit more fulfilled now than you were driving around in those Porsches.
Yeah, that was all empty. That was what society told me was the
So
symbol
society
of
tells
success.
all of us, right?
Yeah.
You have to impress these people you don't care about by buying things you don't
Right.
really want or need.
Wear the right clothes, the right watch, drive the right car, have the right home in the right neighborhood. Go to the right
have
vacations.
a home with 5 bedrooms, even though you only use 2.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Join the right clubs, all that kind of stuff, which I did early on. I had success early on,
Sure.
and I felt totally unfulfilled after doing it. It's like, oh, this is what it's all
But
about.
that's what people need. That's what people need to hear more. People
Yeah.
don't get it, and like when people see that Robin Williams kills himself, which is so sad, and all the Anthony Bourdain or Bourdain, how you pronounce his name, and all these celebrities that do, they're just like, oh well, that was just like one thing. Like, do you think that there could be a consistent, like that's not the answer? Like this
I think
materialistic is
wealth
not
is
what brings you happiness?
Wealth is like a magnifying glass to your own quirkiness and idiosyncrasies and fears and doubts, and it magnifies everything dramatically
Right.
after you get what you thought your goal was. So, you look at the statistics on lottery winners, it's shocking what happens to them.
What's the overall? I've heard it.
The
But what do you-
overall is a very negative effect.
Right.
Even though they have hundreds of millions in the bank, they no longer trust anyone now because everyone's after their money.
Sure.
Right? Or they bought the house and they're depressed still, and they're sitting in their living room with everything they can imagine, and they're depressed as hell. Why? Because it's not about the money.
No.
And it's just the realization is such a drastic hit, and they either cope with it or they commit suicide or they gamble it all away in a self-destructive mode.
Again, in a hopes to get more too, because in a way these people.
No, it's not about getting more. It's about getting the feeling they thought they were supposed to have.
Well, it was for me on getting more. Like when I was just like, when I make this company go from out of my house into like $1 million business, like that'll be it. And then it did turn into that. I was like, I guess it's 100 million. Yeah. And then thank God I ended up getting into philosophy and stuff like that a little over a year ago. And I was like, no. That's not like, no. Once it does get to 100 million, if it does, that's not going to solve anything.
There's something in your head that says $1 million means society will look at me and say I'm a success.
That's the golden goose, right?
Right. And then the bar's always moving. And then when you get to the bar and you realize that's not really what people are looking at you about anymore, and suddenly your personal relationships are all suffering because it didn't fix them.
Oh, the amount of super wealthy people on their deathbeds, when they're interviewed, it's fascinating. Have so many regrets about just going after a dollar. And here's the thing: when they're interviewed by like Wall Street Journal or whoever ends up doing it, the journalist is the only one there. Nobody cares. They were just looking after the dollar, and what are they saying? I regret that you're really the only one here, and I just went after this dollar, and nobody's gonna be at the funeral or anything like that because that's what you cared about. When what are we really? We're social beings. We're supposed to care for each other. This underlying human constitution that I believe that goes beyond any sort of country borders is just do good to others. Not because it might come back to you, just because it's the right thing to do. If it does come back, good for you. But if it doesn't, you feel great anyway.
And there's something that happens even with the first time, if you consider it the first time you do something good that's outside of yourself and truly selfless. You either feel, you'll have that euphoria and then the realization of everything else you haven't done that way.
Right.
And it's like Pandora's box. Once it's opened, you can never close that box again. The realization hits and either propels you towards more positive actions or...
What made yours open?
When I had early success and I sat on a yacht off Boca Raton with a bottle of champagne and went, this sucks. That's when it hit me that how did I end up here?
Uh-huh.
And I'm about to get divorced. My life sucks.
I'm on a yacht with champagne.
I don't have kids yet, which I wanted when I was 18. All these things that it was such an empty feeling that I could have gone one of two ways.
But that's the dream. What you're just talking about, that's what everyone dreams about, Preston.
Yeah.
Man, that's you. That's you. But if I had it, that would be great. I would have all these models around me. Life would be good.
It's like, you know what it's like? It's like saying, I'm going to get to the ends of the earth. And you keep going around the globe and realize there's no end. And just you get to a goal and there's more and more and just, a vicious circle. And I just, not that it has made me, materially wealthy. I am not wealthy by any stretch of imagination. I pour all my effort and money into building this business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, most entrepreneurs are like ranchers. We're cash poor and asset or company rich.
Right.
So,
and that would be where I would be as well. But that's if you define wealthiness in a monetary sense, because you are wealthy.
Oh,
and
in all the other ways, I feel blessed. I have a wife that loves me and I love her. I have 2 kids that, are what I consider they built their heads right.
And your community involvement, basically.
Well, that's enriching because I see stuff happening that later on I go, wow, I think I remember doing something that helped that. And that's rewarding to go, wow, we have a campus here. We have whatever it is that's happening that I did an extremely small part of, but it feels good,
And what you end up getting from that is you have this entire town. Basically, if you do care about this, that's one way or another. I think that's another conversation. But you have pretty much a whole town. When I mention your name, it's nothing but positive. I've never once mentioned your name like, oh well, one time. I'll tell you a story about Preston, which it does happen with other people. I know it happens with me, and that's something I need to overcome because, as you said, when you open up Pandora's box, you look at the way you were operating before.
Sure.
And so when I opened up mine last January, I look back and was just like, the arrogance was so full. So
my demons come out, yes, and I appreciate the comment. I feel that when I'm, on purpose, on track of doing good without reward, that's awesome. But at 4 o'clock in the morning, I still will wake up with nightmares. My fear about failing, because, that's still as far as my pattern.
When you say failing
is
business,
whatever
right?
I think in that moment. No, failing in all sorts of things. Like, as a parent, I traveled for 7.5 years every week down to the Bay Area when the kids were young. I feel like a massive failure. It took a massive realization to say, I'm going to commit career suicide and stop working in the Bay Area and do something here.
Right.
And it was career suicide, pulling myself out of the ecosystem that I was getting known for into a place that no one knew me.
You can't fret about the past, though, because there's no change.
Oh, no, but the fear is always about, is that clock in my head, which is my demon, and it's not a good thing to have, is, did I do the right thing? Am I doing the right? Did I say the right thing?
I think that's a much better demon than most people.
Well, I don't know. So, I had no stage fright, but I have stage regret. When I get on the stage, I feel confident I can say and talk, and then afterwards I overanalyze. Did I do it right? Did I say it right? Did I do it from ego? Did I do it from purpose? All these kind of things that operate in my head because I'm constantly reassessing myself to make sure I'm walking my talk, and I hate it when I find when I don't.
And so you do find out you don't.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I actually was doing it in the beginning of this podcast. I don't know if you noticed, but basically in the beginning, we were going, and I was just like, well, let me tell you some things that I know. And I was just like, what the hell are you doing? This is a guy that you're just trying to do that because these cameras are on. This is not a normal conversation you have with Preston. And I just kind of realized, I was just like, God, you arrogant son of a bitch. So I basically reeled it back.
It's all right, man. It's all right. But you got there.
Yeah.
You got there.
Thanks.
So
I tried.
we all fall in it. And, Einstein I love, and he's in my head. He's in my head a lot as far as the kind of intellect and kind of moral and ethical structure that goes with it. To have that intellect and the moral and ethical structure yet. And yeah, there were things that I found out through reading his biographies.
Marrying his cousin.
Yes, things that I would go, oh, well, I have to put my framework at that time. Is that appropriate for that time, kind of thing. But needless to say, this man was conscious about his impact for good and ill, and he worked on that impact. He always tried, and yet he things would come out because of his background or whatever it is that he would regret later. And he had discoveries that he regretted, right? Especially about the E equals MC squared.
Yeah, I was going to say, he regretted that, didn't he?
Nuclear power, positive, nuclear bomb, negative.
Sure.
And the negative outweighed the positive in his head. And he said, maybe I should have been a shoemaker? I think it's the famous phrase.
The thing about, I understand how he sees the negative, and it's because he saw it used against Japan twice. So he's like, oh, this is the way of the world now. But look what ended up happening in the long run, right? So those were dropped at 45, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm off by, I think it's 45. And so now we're going on, basic math is 64 years later. And it hasn't happened again.
75 years?
Is it 75? Oh, yeah, it's 75.
It hasn't happened, again, through war, but it happened for a lot for research. They were exploding bombs all over the earth and in the water and in the ground and above ground, in the air. Even though the people who were doing it already knew the impact. It's sort of like Roundup right now. Roundup's, Bayer's about to go trying to distance itself from the Roundup because there's massive amounts of lawsuits that they full and well knew were coming, and yet the dollar drove them to keep that product on the market.
That P&L statement we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's an instance where someone along the way, like Einstein, had a moment where they could have decided, this is ill and good. Profit is something in between.
Sure.
There's ill and good and there's profit. It's almost like its own moral, meter, and it's somewhere along the lines, ill and good get lost when the meter is profit and loss.
I actually see a lot of good from the atomic bomb being created. The lens that I'm looking through it at right now is we have had this ability to blow ourselves up for 75 years, yet we haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
I think that shows just how good humans are. When people like to hate on it, when the media says, oh, the world's going to crap and everything like that, and just that thing right there, like, we have the ability to do it. Why haven't we done it?
It takes one person, just one, Hitler, right? One person who would have used the bomb.
Well, Kim Jong-un, he can.
Right. So we're on the verge at any moment where, in the heat of reflection, they feel the best thing to solve their problem is, shoot a bomb.
But it hasn't happened. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm like, maybe there is, or it's just this underlying notion of like everyone's going to die if I do this, including me.
Oh, that's that mad principle,
right?
Mutually assured destruction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except a madman who grabs a nuke out of a silo in a country that's been overrun, like Pakistan.
Sure.
That's a live example of what could happen if that government fails. There are nuclear weapons that suddenly get into the hands of people who have a totally different idea of what a positive outcome looks like. And it's, destroying some other country for some of those folks.
Right. Well, hopefully, in the sake of that would be a terrorist. It'd be labeled as a terrorist event, right? And you'd be like, okay, under what nation? Hopefully, it would be like this is a nationless attack. So for us to just all of a sudden nuke Israel or whoever the finger is pointed to would be pretty unjustified and would result in a bunch of nukes coming back at us. So even if one was captured by a madman, I could have the argument of saying yes, and it could go off, but I don't think it would lead to the world destruction based on that mad principle.
Well, I don't think a madman can start it, but it's rational men that will end it. And they react irrationally in that moment and say, nuke Russia all to hell, and it ruins the planet.
Sure.
So it's all said and done. It's rational men that still hold the destruction of Earth. It's the madman who can start it.
So I basically see as so far a lot of good, and the other good angle on it too. And hopefully Einstein, if he is looking out for someone like, it's kind of cool that we haven't done that yet, is the fact that you can have the argument that that's why there hasn't been a World War III. Why do you have a World War One in the tens, and then another one just 30 years later, and then all of a sudden we go 75 years without one? When there's,
Without a world war, yeah.
Without a world war, without two powers going at it, why hasn't China invaded Taiwan?
Right.
Well, it's because we're back, or the U.S., right? Yeah. Why hasn't Russia in the Cold War? They could have. I mean, there was little mini battles that you could talk about, like Vietnam could be argued as a battle of the Cold War, and same with Korea and things of that nature. But there wasn't full on like we're invading Russia right now. It's just because you have those nukes.
It's like I remember Reagan standing in front of the UN, and he had this comment that sort of flipped a lot of people out. It says, wouldn't it be great if some unseen force, like aliens, attacking our planet, forced us all to forget about nation states and focus on common good, common enemy or common good.
Oh my gosh, that would be very good. I was actually just having a conversation about this with one of my buddies. I was like, and I was just thinking, not on a world sense, but on our nation sense, we need that. We need something
to get us out of our, hyper-focused, local, regional. I need that road built in my district, so I'll pass legislation that makes no sense.
Yeah.
I need to keep myself elevated in the party, and although ACA, my own family's benefiting from it, I'm going to kill it because the party wants it done. It's all these kind of things that people are weighing constantly that have nothing to do with the reality of doing something for human good.
Right, and the severe divide that's happening right now with people in their own echo chambers on social media and everything, getting worse and worse with the left and the right just getting further apart, not agreeing on anything. I was like, man, we could use some alien invasions.
Exactly. An outside threat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, or the opposite of an outside threat is an outside goal, which is what Elon and
Hey, so there was some. Okay, so going into that really quick. I don't want to rant for too long, but I'm a little upset with this whole notion that's going on. I didn't vote for Trump, but I do notice he's done some good things, and I hate the notion where the media is saying everything he's doing is bad. And so one thing I did like about the moon race is it basically brought us all together to be like, that was pretty cool that I got a guy in the moon. And I was like, we need like another like moon thing or an outside threat, something like that to help bring this country together. And Trump kills, you know what, we're going to bring in contract work between Blue Origin and SpaceX and whoever wants to throw their hat in the ring to get us back to the moon by 2024. And just everything was negative. New York Times, Wall Street, everything was just, well, big waste of money, anything like that. It's like, why can't we just be like, yeah, it'd be really cool if we went there and saw and brought new technology. Like Musk would love it. Be like, yeah, get there and see what's going on. Start harvesting who knows what, because we only went there 4 times.
Sure. And I think that's what people lose sight, in the press included. That they're in the moment. Right. It's a disaster in a moment to say that because, gosh, healthcare fails them. Kennedy, when he said go to the moon, created a government agency that then created so many spawned technologies that we wouldn't be here today with what we have. Even cell phones, right? That was all satellite-driven kind of stuff, right? Without that kind of let's get to the moon when we couldn't even get off the freaking planet with a rocket. So, I definitely believe in moonshots or galaxy shots or whatever you want to call it. If we reach for the stars, we get to the moon. If we reach for the moon, we get in orbit. So it's as big as our goal gets, the further it drives us to succeed. We probably would never get to another galaxy in any of our lifetimes.
Right.
But if we say we're going to go to another galaxy, it propels everything to beyond where we would have imagined anyway. Even if we fail, we're beyond where we imagined.
Gives us, and it gives us a goal of coming together and being and just have a bit of pride. And first the moon, then we get to Mars, and we start figuring just what's there to find out there? It's a great unknown, one of the last frontiers, right? That in our oceans.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Again, the guy says a lot of mad stuff, but he has done some good things, and it's just like, can we get behind America a little bit? And what's it going to take to get people to have a sense of like pride again? I don't know if it's possible the way we're going, but
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's possible, but we should strive for the impossible anyway.
yeah, right.
You know?
And that we'll be talking forever. So cheers, thanks for coming
Cheers to
on.
you.